Greetings and welcome, thank you for coming. Before we begin, let me take a few moments to give the obligatory like this video, comment on this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and more importantly, share this video with a friend, an enemy, a coworker, or your drill instructor. Let's try and get this channel to 1,000 subscribers before Christmas. While you're at it, be sure to check out my Patreon channel. Consider becoming a subscriber and help keep my editor energized with pizza and beer. Seriously, editors are a large part of what makes the world go round in this business. Let's give them some love. And lastly, a quick shout out to my Tier 4 patrons. Russ of the Frozen North, New5AC, Nick, Zachary Langmead, and Scared Wolf 1206. Thank you very much. And now, on with the story. The Deathworlders, a story by Philip R. Johnson, a.k.a. Hambone, Hambone HFY, and Hambone 3110. Chapter 24, An Alien World, Part 7. Date point, 10 years, 4 months, 1 day AV. Seawall, Stanley Park, Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, Earth. Zhu Chang. Just running was a relief. Moving was a relief. Not being surrounded by people asking questions. So many questions. Getting away from her fussing mother. From a father who was constantly melancholy when he should have been delighted. From a big little brother she didn't know how to talk with. Just the freedom to run under open sky, in correct gravity rather than on a treadmill, when every other breath that rushed into and through and out of her was dense and rich and right, almost intoxicating. For the first time since arriving on Earth, Zhu was home. Apparently, home was sweatpants, a cerulean running top, running shoes, asphalt pounding away under her, and chilly sea air smelling of salt water and distant fish. Too early in the morning for there to be anything but trees and benches to her left, and water and mountains to her right, and only the occasional hardcore jogger like herself to break the tranquility. Earth itself was welcoming her home just fine. Trees and mountains and the smell of the sea hadn't changed a bit. It was people who were giving her difficulty. Old school friends who'd visit just long enough for an awkward hug and a gift before vanishing. The reporters poised around her parents' house had only finally been persuaded to leave by the realization that Zhu was determined not to make herself pretty for the camera, and was more interested in getting the hell away from them. Employers wanted experience and marketable skills, for which purposes Kung Fu, fluency in an alien language, and 3 years of living as a vagrant in disguise apparently didn't count. It was all so complicated. And worse, everyone seemed to be disappointed and upset when she didn't fit seamlessly back into their lives as if nothing had happened. As if she hadn't been homeless and alone and had to fight monsters and nearly been killed, and as if what happened to her was her fault and she should just deal with it. The city itself didn't give a fuck, thankfully. It was comforting just to run past the same old landmarks, be just another face on the street, an Asian girl on her morning fitness routine, anonymous and glad of it. She was breathing hard by the time she passed under Lionsgate Bridge. Too many years of alien gravity, 3 weeks of hospital, binging on her mother's home cooking, and the last lingering effects of being spaced had all conspired to badly hurt her fitness compared to the last time she had run this route. She paused at the Prospect Point Lighthouse, mentally calculating how far it was to Seawash Rock, which had been her objective for the day. Too far. Much too far, if she was being sensible. She'd be a wreck by the time she reached it, and she'd still have to get back. To hell with sensible, she muttered, not noticing that she'd said it in Geori, and kept going. She wanted to be thoroughly exhausted today, having had the bad news that morning that one of the girls in her ballet class had died less than 4 months after she, Zhu, had been abducted. A bad cold had turned into chest infection and had become pneumonia without anybody realizing. She'd gone to bed early to try and sleep it off, never to wake. She'd been 19. Missing a couple of weddings and the birth of a little girl named after her had all been body blows too. Running and recovering her fitness was keeping her mind off how much she'd missed at least. It was helping her cope. There was a spot about 200 meters further on where the seawall path kinked inwards to hug the bottom of the cliff, and when it did, she almost tripped and fell over because she'd just run into a dream. Somebody had placed a sculpture out in the water. It hadn't been there 10 years ago, in fact. Being burnished steel on a post in salt water, it probably hadn't been out there for very long at all. But it was right out of the vivid dreams she'd had aboard Sanctuary. A faceless steel man sitting cross-legged and pondering a globe held delicately in his left hand. She gaped at it, immobilized by déjà vu, and then decided that maybe sensible had its merits. She glanced back at it, half expecting it to suddenly stand and throw the ball to her, and then retraced her steps. She was still in a badly shaken mood by the time the taxi she had called returned her to her parents' home in Strathcona. Slightly more shaking still was the man sitting in their front room making polite small talk over tea with her family. Zhu would be the first to admit to a nigh total lack of experience with men. She had been kept away from them before her abduction. Then, during her years of absence, the male she'd spent the most time with had been Regari, who probably didn't count, given that he wasn't even human. Sure, towards the end there had been Julian, Louis, Amir, and Zane. But, by and large, men were an alien species to her. But she'd spent years living among alien species and learning how to read them, and this one, when he looked at her, did something that the Quartai normally did. He looked a little too long. He evaluated. He analyzed. She immediately took a disliking to him. He was kind of easy on the eyes, though. Tall, all the best features of both white and African heritage, and either his suit was tailored or he'd gotten unbelievably lucky at the store, and it didn't look cheap enough to be store-bought. Zhu was nearly as out of touch with fashion as she was with men, given that the inspirations for the styles that had inspired the inspirations for the previous generation's inspirations hadn't even been 3 seasons away when she left, but there was something almost kinnish about the cut of it. She'd seen a gaggle of 3 of them once parading down a station concourse, as tall and flimsy and decorative as orchids, and the ornate fascinators they'd been wearing seemed to have inspired elements of the man's lapels and the subtle patterning around the hem of his jacket. As slick and expensive as the suit was, the man wearing it had a kind of rough-and-ready stubbled look, including a peculiar scar, a lattice of slim white lines slightly forward of his left temple. She addressed her mother in Mandarin. "Who's this?" she asked. "Another reporter? Please, Mom, I don't want to talk to him." Amazingly, he replied perfectly in the same language. "I'm not a reporter, Miss Chang. Nothing to worry about there." It took her a second to realize that he lacked any kind of an accent at all, which was a trait characteristic of translator devices, and sure enough, when she glanced at the table, there was a small silver cube there, which was almost certainly exactly that. She spared herself an irritated blush by muttering something about needing a shower and vanished upstairs. Once clean, she changed into her loose gray sweatpants and a white ribbed vest top, then lurked in her Spartan bedroom in hopes that he'd go away. No such luck. Eventually, there was a knock on the door. Li Chang stuck his head around his daughter's door. "You may want to talk to this one," he told her gently. Zhu sighed. "Do I have to?" she asked. "I've spoken to the intelligence people, the doctors, the news." "I don't think he's going to be here asking the same questions," her father said. "I say, give him a chance." She scooted up the bed and sat against the wall, acutely aware that she was behaving like a girl half her age. "Fine. Okay." A minute or so later, the stranger knocked on the door and entered on a reluctant welcome. He'd taken off the jacket at some point, and Zhu had to admit she hadn't anticipated the large tattoo that seemed to completely cover his right arm. To her irritation, he took one look at the bare walls and floor and chuckled. "Something funny?" she asked him. "Hey, we seem to have gotten off on the wrong foot. I'm sorry about that," the man said. It had been years since she'd last heard a Texan accent. He cast about for something to sit down on, gave up, and offered her a handshake. "Kevin." She shook it, deciding that she should at least be polite. "Zhu." "Yeah, sorry, I shouldn't have laughed, but I did the exact same thing when I got back, too. When Zhu just frowned at him, he waved a hand at the pronounced lack of items that her cleanup had left behind. This. You spend a few years living out amongst the stars, surrounded by all those critters with nothing but what you're carrying. Get home, kind of feels like all that stuff ain't yours no more, doesn't it? So you're Kevin Jenkins, she guessed, finally recognizing him and irritated at the too smooth attempt to identify with her. I thought I recognized you from somewhere. The Gowans showed me the news reports you were in. You're the reason it took me this long to get back. You're the reason I had to spend all that time in disguise and running. Oh, come on, be fair, he complained. It's not like I ordered the Governor Ag to put that force field up there, and I sure as hell didn't order the Dominion to start throwing folks over to the wolves. You ran your mouth off. He exhaled and lowered himself onto the floor. Maybe I did, he agreed. I never thought it... Didn't you ever say something out there that maybe scared somebody, or they took it the wrong way? Zhu didn't answer. What do you want? She asked him instead. Geez, lady, why the third degree? Really? You can't see how maybe it's a bit frustrating how people in suits keep showing up who want to talk to me and ask me questions? And the question is never, what can I do for you, Miss Chang? Or, yes, about your resume. We have need of a Gowan language expert for this movie we're making. Are you interested in auditioning? No, every time, it's something people want me to do for them. Jenkins just watched her warily. He was doing that quartile analysis thing again. So, Zhu scooted forward on the bed, planted her feet on the floor, and gave him her best glare. So go on then. What do you want? He considered his answer carefully, licking his teeth as he looked around the room. Full disclosure, he said at last. First of all, you've got to know from the news thingy that I'm an old friend of Kirk's, and yeah, I guess I'd sure like to hear news about him. That's my personal reason for coming here. Professionally? I knew it! Professionally, Jenkins forged ahead. We have need, yes, of a Gowan language expert, and an extraterrestrial survival expert, someone who can live on a ship without much in the way of possessions. He swept a hand demonstratively around the room. Basically, somebody with your skill set. Zhu glowered at him. A spaceship? She asked. You're offering me a job on a spaceship? Yeah. Why would I want to leave? She asked. I only just got back. Jenkins gave her another calculating stare, then stood up. I know those scars on your arm, he said, causing her to glance unconsciously at them. A hunter gave you those. I've seen their teeth right up close and personal, and that on your neck is where some fella had a knife to your throat, up against a wall, if I'm any judge. Seen that plenty of times, too. Scary place this galaxy of ours, ain't it? Get out! You look at people like the Cortai do, too, you know. A sick, cold ball of anger dropped right into Zhu's stomach. What? When you walked in, first thing you did was evaluate me, calculate. And I saw you'd see me do the same thing to you, and I saw you didn't like it. And I get why. Don't much care for those little gray assholes myself, not after they bolted a prototype implant to my head like something out of Terminator. I'm sorry, it's nothing personal, just a survival habit both you and I picked up out there. When Zhu didn't say anything, he apparently took it for permission to keep talking. And then you come back here, and it's not like you imagined, is it? He asked, rhetorically. You imagined it'd all be your old bed and your ma's cooking, and then it turns out things have moved on. The world's changed, and home turns out to be a place in your head you can't ever go back to because those gray motherfuckers took it from you, and you won't ever get it back. Believe me, I tried. Oblivious or uncaring of her mounting rage, he pressed the point. I thought Earth was home too, but you and me, we were out there for too long and it changed us. And guess what? You weren't here for their lives either. My daughter grew up, so did your little brother. We both missed weddings. One of your friends died while you were gone." Zhu erupted to her feet and punched him full in the nose, breaking it. He staggered against the wall and clamped a hand over the sudden blood flow. He was too preoccupied with the pain and surprise to say anything, but he still managed to stare a wide-eyed question at her. "I don't know who you think you are, and I don't care," she snarled at him. "You don't know me. You don't know what I went through. Don't you try to project your baggage onto me, and don't you dare try to use me like that, you creep!" He shouldered himself off the wall. "You don't think that was maybe a bit of an overreaction?" he mumbled through his hand, feigning bravado. "Who told you could come into my house and treat me like a prize?" Zhu prodded his chest. "Nobody gets to do that. Not you, not anybody." "And here I was thinking we were making a connection," Jenkins muttered as he adjusted his grip, wincing as he pinched his nostrils shut. "You came into my house," Zhu repeated. "You tricked my parents. You tried to manipulate me. You tried to get inside my head. You tried to use these..." She gestured at the ragged scar lines on her arm, to the tiny cut on her throat. "To make me do what you want. My answer is no. You go away. You go away right now." Jenkins nodded and opened the door. "Offer of a job still stands," he croaked. "Then get somebody who can treat me like a human being rather than objective to put it in writing," Zhu snapped. "Get out!" She slammed the door behind him, catching him in the backside and congratulating herself as she heard him barely avoid falling down the stairs. Then she sank onto her bed. She was shaking and crying when her parents rushed in seconds later. Kevin Jenkins. Staggering across the road while holding his nose together nearly earned Kevin a car to the knee. He raised an apologetic hand to the driver. The other one, being clamped around his bleeding nose, adequately made the case that he was slightly preoccupied right now, and made it to his own car, fumbled with the door sensor, and thumped down on the driver's seat. He sat there pinching his nostrils, swearing for a good 10 minutes before he was finally satisfied that the bleeding had ceased. He pulled down the sun visor and peered into its makeup mirror. The nose wasn't crooked, at least, but it was bruised. There were dark splotches under his eyes for good measure, and his shirt was in dire need of a dry cleaner's attention. He touched the nose experimentally and flinched. "Way to go, dumbass," he congratulated himself. "Fucking perfect." Date point: 10 years, 4 months, 1 day, AV. Mawerki Station, Uncharted System, Deep Space. Kirk. Kirk had once seen a human documentary in which a team of fishermen sat and patiently repaired their nets after a successful trawl. At the time, he hadn't fully appreciated that while repairing the net was still massively less of a task than weaving a new one, it must still have been tedious and time-consuming. After all, only Deathworlders would consider it normal for an animal to damage a net of woven plastic fibers. Doubly so when the animal in question did so without claws, teeth, or a knife, but simply with its own mass and strength. To the fisherman, a routine part of the day. To Kirk, more than that. Mending his own net, the galactic web of contacts, favors called in, bribes issued, and reputations blackmailed that had kept him fed with information from across Dominion space was tedious. Yes, time-consuming. Yes. Fiddly, delicate, and at times frustrating. Yes. It was hampered all the more that he had to do it now at arm's length and through proxies and agents, none of whom could be allowed to know who he was. The galaxy had not heard from Kirk in a long time, and his sudden reappearance could not possibly pass without comment. The more he achieved before those comments began, the better. His time away had changed some of the players, too. Politicians had retired, criminal figures had been arrested, killed, or wisely resigned into obscurity before either of those fates caught them. The only solution was to rebuild, slowly. And while that was a task that by and large was proceeding at a satisfactory pace, it did often leave him seated by his desk trying to be entertained while waiting for a message to arrive. Right now, he was listening to an audiobook. Unintended effects are always possible. For instance, the most dangerous road on Earth now appears to be a 2-lane highway between Kabul and Jalalabad. When it was unpaved, cratered, and strewn with boulders, it was comparatively safe, but once some helpful Western contractors improved it, the driving skills of the local Afghans were finally liberated from the laws of physics. Many now have the habit of passing slow-moving trucks on blind curves, only to find themselves suddenly granted a lethally unimpeded view of a 1,000-foot gorge. Are there lessons to be learned from such missteps in the name of progress? Of course, but they do not negate the reality of progress. He paused the book and mulled that thought over, only to be interrupted by Vedrig. If Lewis was a study in how humans could absorb massive volumes of information and correlate them in breathtaking ways, and if Kirk was a living justification for his species' reputation for shrewdness in politics, Vedrig was... well, he had become very interested in baking. At first, Kirk had been very uncharitably scornful of this, but Vedrig had proven once again that he wasn't actually stupid, just slow. In English, Kirk knew the two terms were used more or less as synonyms, but in the case of Governor Ag, the difference became apparent, both in matters of body and matters of the mind. Nobody, not even the most inventively charitable liar, could have realistically described Governor Ag as fast. But they did have inertia, which could be the next best thing. It had certainly allowed them to outperform the Cortai when it came to large force field technology and a few associated technological fields. The Cortai preferred for their research to yield dazzling new inspirations that could make the researcher's reputation and earn them a promotion. Hard graft wasn't their style at all, and so in areas where the patient ability to keep chewing away at the details yielded incremental, cumulative improvements, they were surprisingly lacking. Governor Ag were all about hard graft. They didn't have much of an alternative. And so, while Lewis and Kirk had been blitzing around the station familiarizing themselves with its layout, its capabilities, and its systems, reinforcing some repairs, and in Lewis's case, a thorough search for terrifying killing machines, Vedrig had parked himself in an unobtrusive spot and had thought. He had then, after some trial and error, some research, the assembly of a few appropriate tools, and raiding the station's food storage stasis lockers, baked an apple pie. It wasn't actually an apple pie, of course. The nearest apple was tens of thousands of light years away, as was the nearest flour, not to mention the butter and eggs, which neither Kirk nor Vedrig could have eaten anyways, and the less said about cinnamon, the better. But desiccating and then milling down some universal ration spheres had produced a dry edible powder, and fructose was fructose all over the galaxy, present in the cuisine of every species, though not, it had to be said, in the quantities called for by most human recipes. Earth's death world condition had caused plants to evolve that could generate sugar in terrifying quantities that had never been available to non-human chefs. The real key to the dish, however, was a type of fruit called a rourke, the flesh of which was tart, sweet, and not dissimilar to an apple in texture and culinary properties. Rourke had long been a firm favorite of Kurumbura gastronomes, but Vedrig's genius had been to recognize that the slimy fluid core of the fruit and the oily substance that protected its seed were acceptable matches for egg and butter, respectively. The result was a failure, an abject one. What the oven eventually belched out had turned out to be a monstrosity of black caramelized fruit sugars and a pastry substitute that fell apart at a suspicious glance. The second attempt had been marginally more successful. The third, practically intact. The fourth had been a pie. Not, according to Lewis, an apple pie. The taste apparently had more in common with something called grapefruit, but still very pleasing to the palate. Once the basic principle of the pastry was down, Vedrig had thrown himself into baking with gusto. Lewis had complained about the enforced vegan diet at one point, but the nauseated signals he'd received from both the obligate herbivores on the crew had induced him to drop the subject. In any case, Vedrig's offerings had grown commendably in complexity and skill, and he made big portions, the smallest of which wound up on Kirk's plate. It was slightly disconcerting to see that Lewis ate slightly more than Vedrig, despite being roughly a tenth of Vedrig's mass. He also tended to the running of the place. Thanks to Vedrig, the station was clean, the lighting was powered, mealtimes were scheduled. By taking over and keeping Lewis fit and healthy, he had created time for Kirk to complete his objectives, and during the 2 days every week that Vedrig spent hibernating, the place noticeably went downhill. Despite all that, it hadn't clicked for Kirk what it was that his friend was doing until the day Lewis referred to him affectionately as Jeeves. Vedrig, of course, had needed the reference explained, hence why he was now pulsing purple-blue in amused confusion while watching a bit of Fry and Laurie. Lewis, meanwhile, was enjoying his weekly break from study to watch it alongside him. He had climbed, carefully, onto Vedrig's wide back and was grinning at the comedy.
"I do not understand," Vedrig said. "His name is to drop a small object? It is absurd."
"That's the point, dude. Yeah, it's surreal."
"This word, surreal, does not translate."
Aw, man, we're getting pretty abstract here. Surreal is like when things are like reality, but wrong in some way. Bizarre.
"I do not understand," Vedrig repeated.
"Humor never translates," Kirk told them both. "Ever." "Oh, please, that's bullshit. We're all sapiens. We're all similar."
"Our friend, is correct, Lewis," Vedrig grumbled. "I do not understand human humor, and you will not understand the humor of the Governor of Vendragon."
"All right, bring it. Hit me with your best joke, Jeeves," Lewis challenged him. He sat up and, carefully so as not to injure, slid down off Vedrig's back.
"Very well.
Vedrig grumbled at Governor Ag, throat clear.
Tiny Geveridig goes to her herd father and declares, 'Largest one, I am thirsty.' The herd father points to the mountain."
Kirk and Lewis exchanged mutual bewildered expressions as Vedrig glowed royal purple and produced a wheezing sound deep in his chest, his species' version of uproarious laughter. Slowly he faded.
Do you not see? Largest one, the mountain."
"My turn," Lewis said. 3 men walk into a bar. You'd think one of them would have seen it." He smiled hopefully, as it was Vedrig and Kirk's turn to express confusion. "I guess puns don't really work so well. Okay, how about an anti-joke?"
"Anti-joke?"
Vedrig asked. "Okay, so what's so funny about a shuttle full of Cortai exploding?" Vedrig flashed alarm white.
"I can see nothing amusing in this scenario. It would be a tragic loss of sapient life."
Lewis sagged. Yes, exactly, that's the punchline."
"I am confused," Vedrig told him.
Okay, I know. How about... "My turn," Kirk interrupted. "And this should prove my point." Lewis sighed. "Fine." Kirk nodded at length. "Somewhere deep in space, a freighter pilot picks up a distress beacon," he began. "They rescue the escape pod and are pleased to find that the occupant is a fellow Rurkaturk. They explain that, sadly, their freighter is a slow one, and that it'll be many recot before they next arrive at port, but the castaway is simply grateful for the rescue. At mealtime, the four of them sit down to enjoy Suksuk and Zerk and welcome their new guest. Just as they have begun to eat, the captain says, 12. His two crewmates laugh, and one replies, 8, to further merriment. Naturally, this confuses the newcomer, who requests an explanation. We have worked together for hundreds of Rick, the captain explains. We all know each other's jokes by now, and so it's more efficient to refer to them by number. The newcomer nods his understanding and falls silent. Shortly thereafter, he looks around and ventures. 15? There's no response. 9? Still nothing. Exasperated, he asks what he's doing wrong. The junior deckhand shakes his mane sadly and informs him, Your delivery is terrible. Vedrig promptly signaled blue confusion, but Lewis's lips drew back into an imposing Deathworlder smile, and he made kind of a wheezing noise that took Kirk seconds to identify as a laugh. Oh, man. Yeah, okay, that's a good one. It seems I was wrong, Kirk observed, deeply surprised. You understood? Heh, yeah, your own delivery was pretty good.
What does delivery have to do with...
Vedrig began, then sagged when Lewis and Kirk both turned to look at him.
The herd is following a truly ancient father when 4 Mumrovendi fly overhead. The oldest child cries, Face the wind, he ventured hopefully.
Was that a fart joke? Lewis asked. That was a fart joke.
As a matter of fact, it was,
Vedrig agreed, turning a slightly embarrassed shade of magenta. See? There is universal humor, Lewis turned and grinned triumphantly. Kirk held up all 4 hands and feet, then handed him a tablet.
And while we're joking around, he said, contact has been made with Earth.
Lewis grabbed it. Yeah, what'd they say?
Nothing yet. This is all information on how to establish a secure line of communication. I imagine that we will hear more in due course, but for now, it's a start.
Lewis sighed. Frustrating, he declared.
But vital.
I know, Lewis stood up. All right, in that case, I'm going to call it a night. See you tomorrow. They bade him good night, and Vedrig pulsed through a thoughtful rainbow of blues and oranges.
Did he seem upset by that to you? He asked.
He is lonely, Kirk replied.
Humans are intensely social creatures, old friend. I feel the call of my home planet also,
Vedrig replied.
It is stressful to be so far from my herd.
The difference, old friend, is that herd species feel comforted by each other's presence, but do not care for one another in quite the same way humans do, Kirk replied. He is suffering. It makes me feel guilty.
You have confined us all,
Vedrig agreed.
Even if it is for good reasons.
Kirk shook his coat out a little. I have total confidence in Lewis, he said. He will find a solution, and we will be able to send him home.
An alternative approach suggests itself. Kirkentuk Aukentensiktik.
And that is? Vedrig shone a brilliant cyan, as if the answer was obvious.
Bring more humans here.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I am the Casual Deathworlder, your host, and this has been The Deathworlders, Chapter 24, Part 7. I hope you enjoyed listening to it as much as I enjoyed bringing it to you. If you did, please go ahead and smash that like button and drop us a comment down below. It all helps the hungry algorithm. And if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to the channel. And as always, a huge shout out to my editor, Gregor. Thank you very much, buddy. I could not do this without you. Okay, so an odd thought just occurred to me that makes me both proud and sad at the same time. I just realized that a couple episodes back, I actually passed where Zren left off. So there's my hero surpassed, unfortunately. Zren, I do hope you're listening out there, and I do hope you come back to us sometime. Now I just need to pass Net Narrator, which he's not going anywhere anytime soon. So maybe then the subscriptions will mount up. Who knows? But subscriptions are not my primary goal, is to finish this story. I have no idea what that was. That sounded like a snowplow going by the house. Okay. Question. Who's got the question? I know. Swimming. Who here has ever done a mile swim? Whether the BSA mile swim, Girl Scout mile swim, what have you. And was it in a pool or in open water? Leave your answers in the comments down below. Until next time, be safe, be well. I love you all. Bye-bye.